Hey everyone, happy and warm to be reporting here live from the Vintage Barb kitchen, where I'm enjoying the last of this fantastic Manhattan I created with homemade sweet vermouth and a nice brand of bitters and some relatively good cherries. And I wanted to share with you how I make a Manhattan and why I go through the steps that I do. So stay with me here for a few minutes if you're interested in the finest of all the delicious, beautiful bourbon cocktails. Cheers. Yeah. So why a Manhattan? Bourbon in particular is soft and lush and buttery and a little bit sweet. When you add the sweet vermouth, it kind of elevates those flavors. Vermouth provides aromatics and herbal character, and you got a little splash of bitters and a little bit of ice to water it all down. But in general, a Manhattan is just a even slightly sweeter version of a nice sip of fine whiskey, and in my particular case, that's going to be fine Kentucky bourbon. Tonight, I mixed it with a barrel select, actually, version of Buffalo Trace, which is basically entry-level bourbon from Sazerac Distillery in Kentucky, which is one of the most famous, most reputable. They make everything from this here baby bottling to high-end Pappy Van Winkle, and a lot of other stuff in between. But Buffalo Trace is a great bourbon for sipping and for mixing, and it's pretty reasonably priced, about 25 to 30 bucks for this size bottle on a shelf at your local supermarket. So that's a good go-to. It's light-bodied for bourbon. It's a little bit caramelly, but not over the top sweet. It's not too spicy, and it's really good for mixing. So Buffalo Trace, kind of my go-to if I don't have a better option or something else someone's recommended. Other whiskeys I like, especially for a Manhattan, are good old Weller Antique 107. Now, I highlighted this in our Chiberia episode. This is a special Bottle Barn hand select from the nice people in California. And Weller is known especially because it's a weeded bourbon. That means a little bit sweet, more full-bodied, more rich. And I don't necessarily need to mix this with anything. You can sip it on its own. It's kind of indulgent. But for blending, it provides a lot of weight and a lot of just voluptuous body to a delicious whiskey cocktail. So I can't not recommend it. It's really delicious. If you want a good rye-based whiskey cocktail, Willet is the bomb, okay? And for me, frankly, guys, you see it, Willet is a little too expensive for mixing, okay? If you're a rye connoisseur, you should drink this on its own with a splash of water. It's spicy, it's really robust and bold, but if you want a good quality, expensive but phenomenal rye Manhattan, this stuff you can't lose, okay? You can't. It's so good. And I like Eagle Rare, okay? It's another Sazerac Distillery bourbon, but it's lighter bodied and it has a lot of finesse, a little more kind of that corn influence, so a little bit kind of softer, more caramelly, more lush, but it's not as high alcohol, not as high octane, and for sipping or for blending, it's just right in that special Kentucky bourbon kind of way. Plus, they're just really nice, cool, down-to-earth folks at that distillery. One of the first I ever visited. I had a phenomenal time, and we just love everybody at Sazerac. They make amazing stuff, but I don't have time to tell you everything. about that place and all the special things they do there. Let's just say Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, and Pappy Van Winkle, okay? And Blanton's and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, for everyday Kentucky straight bourbon, you guys, Bullet is really where it's at for me. I mean, you can see the size of the bottle that I purchase. Economically, it's fantastic. This handle here, we call it 1.75 liters, goes for about $35 to $40. So for everyday bourbon, for a good bourbon cocktail, I like this especially as like sweet tea or blended with ginger beer, ginger ale, mint julep, that kind of level of bourbon cocktail. I don't necessarily use it for Manhattan because it's a little too spicy and not quite smooth enough for me. But for everyday Kentucky straight bourbon, I'm gonna buy Bullet. I'll buy their rye. I'll buy their 10-year bourbon if I can find it. Like the stuff, like the people, you can't lose, okay? Now, other ingredients in a Manhattan. You guys, we're talking about sweet vermouth, and I have to stress that your cocktail is only as good as its ingredients. So if you're buying bottom of the barrel, shitty whiskey, I mean, if you want to make a Manhattan with Jack Daniels or Jim Beam or worse, that's whatever. If you're gonna make a Manhattan with at least decent whiskey, then you have to use at least decent sweet vermouth. And my go-to is this Antica Formula Carpano. This is kind of the Rolls Royce on the shelf in your local liquor store. It's a little more expensive than, say, Martini and Rossi or even Dolan sweet vermouth, but it's definitely worth it. When I make a Manhattan, I use about 2/3 whiskey to 1/3 sweet vermouth, and if you're not using a good one, there's really no point. So this is my go-to if I'm in a bit of a vermouth pickle. But tonight, what I really want to do is share with you my recipe for homemade sweet vermouth. Vermouth is really just wine-based, heated spirit. So you start with a pretty neutral white wine, and for me, I use like an Alsatian Pinot Blanc. I've been known from time to time to use Washington State dry or semi-sweet Riesling even. You can use Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio. What you don't want is anything too sweet, anything oaky, or anything too rich. So pretty mild, medium acidity, medium bodied, neutral white wine is your base for sweet vermouth. And then we've got a medium sweet sherry. I've been using this fantastic Amontillado. I don't have time to get into all the different styles of sherry today. We'll do that another time, you fortified wine nerds. Okay. But today, this is an Amontillado made with Pedro Jimenez from southwestern part of Spain, the Sherry Triangle. And I use a little bit of this, and then you're also going to blend a little bit of brandy. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can use E&J, you can use Christian Brothers. You could use a flavored brandy if you really want to, and a little bit of simple syrup made from, and I recommend made from Panella specialty sugar, or you can use Demora sugar or raw sugar. These are better than your average, like regular white sugar off the shelf. The reason is it's a little more molassesy and less like cotton candy sugar. But if you don't know how to make simple syrup, you guys, it's equal parts sugar and water, and you boil it down, done deal. Please don't buy cane sugar on a shelf in a grocery store or a liquor store. It's absurd. markup. Just don't do it. Make it yourself. Equal parts. Boil it down for about 2 minutes. Done deal. So to make the vermouth, I blend these ingredients, and then you've got your aromatics. Sorry, I have to... This is so good. You've got your aromatics, and what I use is chamomile, okay? Can you see that? It's pretty. It was pretty. And then this is my kind of house blend, and I've mixed this all up from Whole Foods and a couple other specialty markets for like bulk herbs and aromatics. And this is a blend of allspice, cardamom seeds, star anise, there's some clove in there, there's the cinnamon stick, and maybe most importantly, dried hibiscus. Okay, the hibiscus is going to give the vermouth that really gorgeous lithe red color. The other thing you need is lavender, which I don't have any of. You can substitute rosemary. I don't really like lavender or rosemary, so I don't use them, but it's kind of an important factor in this flavor and these aromatics. But what's going to happen is I'm going to blend this and this. I'm going to put it in a neutral bottle, and I like this half bottle size for vermouth because I just don't use that much of it at a time. And I blend all those ingredients, put a champagne stopper on it just to keep it contained, and I'm going to use my handy dandy Anova immersion circulator, and I do it sous vide, and it's about an hour and a half at about 155 degrees. You don't want to go higher than that because it'll burn off the alcohol, and at that point, why? Like, what are you doing? And you don't want to go much longer than an hour and a half to 2 hours because the aromatics will get, especially the cinnamon, will get a little woody and kind of bitter, and you don't want that. So 155 degrees, an hour and a half to 2 hours, done deal. And you keep it in this little bottle. Unused portion, I recommend you keep in the refrigerator, and it lasts about a month to a month and a half. And when you only make a little batch at a time, it's just right. If you're only having a Manhattan, you know, once or twice a month, so those are your ingredients. You can take your pick, any combination of all of this. Really, the biggest component is your whiskey. Okay, if you want soft and smooth and luxurious, you want a nice, soft, well-aged, high-aged bourbon. If you want spicy, then you want something with a lot of rye, or something even labeled rye or high rye mash bill. You can use Scotch, of course. I hate Scotch. I think it's disgusting. But if that's your bag, go right ahead.
I love Scotch. I love Scotch. Scotchy, Scotch, Scotch. Here it goes down into my belly.
And then we've got to talk about like the little baby things in your glass when it comes to cocktails in general, and especially Manhattans. Firstly is the ice. It is important, you guys. If you go to a specialty mixology spot, they're not using like gross tap water frozen ice cubes. They're using specialty stuff, clarified ice cubes especially, and I have found in my experience it makes a difference. So you're gonna start with that. I'm lucky to have at home this cool, fancy, very bougie ice making contraption from Winter Smiths that I got from Santa Claus last Christmas. And it makes some really neat big globes, slow melting ice balls that I like to use for my whiskey cocktails. If you don't have one of those and you just use regular ice cubes, it's totally fine, okay? I'm just telling you the best way to do it and the best way mixologists do it. The other option you have for ice, you guys, is get yourself some of these little baby ice cube trays. You can make your own cocktail ice cubes. I've been doing this for years. These happen to be with diluted maple syrup. You can also use diluted maraschino cherry juice. Either or both of these for Manhattans are a really nice way. You can kick up a little bit of the sugar content in your cocktail if you don't want it so bitter without really watering it down. I've found in my experience you still have to do about 50-50 because otherwise it won't freeze. It'll just be like gelatinous and gooey and yucky. But I like to use these because I like a Manhattan a little bit sweeter. But get some of these little tiny ice cube trays and play with them for your cocktails. There's so many things you can do with these. I'll probably talk more about them over the summer for wine spritzers and sangria cocktails. These are just absolutely just super fun and you should have in your house. Other ingredients in your Manhattan, number one is bitters. And there's a couple just major brands you'll find out there on the shelves. You can use whatever you want. Really all you're going to use is like 1 or 2 drops. So it's not a huge ingredient. It's not a big deal. But if you use a really good one, you will find it a game changer. And my go-to now is from Hella Cocktails. These are nice people, I think. I got this also from Santa Claus to make more delicious whiskey cocktails at the recommendation of my brother-in-law. Hey, Charles. And this one has a bunch of different flavors of bitters. Orange is very common these days, especially for Manhattans. Aromatic bitters is what most people use. It's the basic. This one also has a smoked chili flavor bitters, which I haven't used yet, but I find intriguing. My go-to though is this little jobby that is ginger. And I've been putting a dash of this in my Manhattans for the last month or so, and it's really changed the game. I just love the spicy floral component that it adds. Yeah, this is something that's really fun. You should check it out and experiment with. And lastly, when it comes to Manhattan, it's about the garnish. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't get super high on cherries. The best ones you can get are Luxardo brand jarred cherries. There aren't better, okay? There just aren't. But I don't have $18 to spend on a jar of cherries for cocktails. So I get these. This is from Tillin Farms. And they're your traditional maraschino cherry style maraschino cherries, but they are natural. It's not like the gross preservatives. It's not super high in high fructose corn syrup and dyes, and it tastes good. And I like to add half a spoonful of this juice into my Manhattan along with 1 or 2 cherries for garnish. So let's go through the motions, shall we? This is the finished one. I got this glass here that had a couple little ice cubes in it. That's okay, it's a little melted, but that's fine. And I don't measure amount of alcohol for my cocktails. Real mixologists and bartenders do. It's like baking. You want to be precise because you want to get it just right. But I'm at home and we are way past the 2-drink minimum.
I'm so drunk I can barely see.
Qualification here, so, and I'm gonna make a short one, but we've got some bourbon, okay? I'm gonna do some sweet vermouth because I'm out of my homemade wintry spicy vermouth. I'm using the Carpano. Once again, this is the best you can buy on the shelf. hands down. I do about 2/3 whiskey to 1/3 vermouth. So in this instance, really just a splash. I'm gonna do like half a teaspoon, not even, of this cherry juice because I like a sweet Manhattan. Most people don't. They want to taste more of the bourbon, and that's totally cool. And then from here, I'm just gonna stir it up, okay? Let a little bit of the ice melt into it. Let it dilute a little bit. You want to stir it to really get the aromatics going and release the phenols in the whiskey. It's very scientific. You know, stirred, not shaken, in case you have heard that from a famous spy. And then I'm just going to pour it over my existing because whatever, you guys don't care, right? You top it off with a splash of your bitters. Like one dash does it, you guys. Yeah. And just for good measure, now I've gone and lost my spoon, so sorry. And I'll throw in a cherry. The cool thing about garnishing your cocktails with cherries is it's very little kid stuff. It's like making the sundae and you get like all over sticky fingers and everything. Only this time, instead of an ice cream cone, you have fantastic boozy cocktail. This is my house Manhattan. I'm happy to share it with you guys. It's just right. And while I freely admit that I've had at least 2 today, even if you have just half of one at the end of a long, hard day, this is about as satisfying as it gets. So look me up if you want more specifics on the vermouth recipe or on classic Manhattan cocktail mixology best practices. I'll share more specifics with you that include things like this teaspoon and this 1/4 cup measuring. I just like to mix and drink it. So cheers to you. Hope you enjoy a bourbon cocktail, especially in Manhattan form, very soon. See you.